Welcome to the Goat District Waiver Wire Show. This is exciting. We're going to call this the OG Live Wire. We're going to be bringing this to you every single Tuesday. Hopefully, it's going to help you win some of your leagues.
Goat District, you know the Pope listens. Dynasty, our religion, for the blokes missing. On all of these trades, on all of these plays, on all of these grades. By the end of the day, y'all getting played. So, what you gonna do next? Try to fill up that flex? Send the homie a text? That trash offer's the best? You try to make it complex, then they text you back. Now all of a sudden, they don't make any sense. Broaden your horizons, boy. Dynasty's not for the Simons, boy. These trades not for consignment, boy. Respect your opponent, y'all some piranhas, boy. This my advice, from me to you. Open up your cute little podcast queue. Search up GOAT District, my dude. Pop it in your ear, man, y'all know what to do. It's the... And I always be traded. And I always be traded. And I always be trading. Y'all try to betray them, but first you gotta bait them. Fish.
So we hope everybody had a great start to their fantasy season. Week one can be a little tilting. We saw some huge performances from some wide receivers that we were on. We saw a couple lackluster performances. Overall, it was a pretty good week for the Goat District teams. We had Andrew Schellenberg, Dan Williamson, and myself. We split an NFFC Super, and we're currently first in the standings there. We split an FFPC Varsity, and we're currently first in the standings there. And then JD, Andrew, Dan, and myself split an FFPC main event, and we lost week one, but we put up 150 plus. And we had a couple of very intriguing guys on our bench that we think are going to come through for us. So we have high hopes for that team as well. It's nice to get off to a hot start, but I think you've got to also look at the amount of points your team is scoring. You don't want to be like a paper tiger who's like 2-0, but putting up 125. I think you really have to be realistic with some of the guys on your team, and that's sort of how I'm approaching it. So we had an awesome time in Vegas. If anybody has an opportunity to, go there for live drafts, it's an awesome experience. I got to meet a lot of Goat District listeners in person from the FFPC and also from the NFFC, and we've got our FFWC listeners as well. It's really nice when people come up and tell us that they listen to the show and that it helps them with their process. I think that we've done a great job of bringing on guests this summer. Hopefully we got you prepared for your drafts and you were able to crush it this year. So basically this show is going to be a short one. We're going to do it every single week. Time is TBD, but it's going to be on Tuesdays. And I want to keep it short and sweet. I think some of these waiver wire shows run long. And I also want to talk about guys that are available to you in your leagues. I think there's a lot of waiver wire shows out there that, and some good ones that are going to tell you to go pick up guys like Darrell Henderson. If you're listening to the Goat District, Darrell Henderson's probably not available in your league. So with respect to those shows, I want to look at guys who are basically 25% or less rostered in Yahoo fantasy leagues. Why do I use Yahoo? Because Yahoo is easy to navigate, easy to look at player percentages. And I do have two Yahoo home leagues. One is a 17-man roster league, and one is like 14. So they're a little deeper than some home leagues, but I think it gives me a little bit of information that I can gauge. Just real quick to touch up on a couple of injuries. We have clarity now on Elijah Mitchell. It looks like he's going to miss 8 weeks. It's a tough call. If you don't have an IR spot, it's a tough player to hold. This is a interesting backfield dynamic. There is players we're going to talk about on the show, but I think it's something you've got to gauge. It's really difficult to hold a player for 8 weeks with no guarantee that he's going to come back and dominate carries or usage. Mitchell had surgery this past offseason. I would try to hold him. If you have an IR spot, I would absolutely hold him. But it's something that you want to, think about, because when you have that roster spot locked down by an injured player, that's one less spot that you can hit the waiver wire with. When the bye weeks start, which I believe is week 6, then you've got another hole in your bench that is basically just a dead ticket in a 20-man roster league. So you've got to really think about it. If I was 50-50 on cutting him, I would probably do it this week, because I would want to take a look at some of the guys we're going to discuss tonight, and potentially maybe their roles are going to expand. If I was going to hold them, I would just, bite the bullet and hold them, but understand that there's some risk with that. We've got a couple comments. Famous Jay's in the house. Hey, Famous Jay, how you doing? 1912 Fantasy. Glad to see you made it out of Vegas alive. It was a very, very wholesome Vegas trip. A lot of drafting, nothing too crazy. I had a chance to go to Circus Sports for the Sunday night game. That is just an awesome, awesome, awesome sports book. If anybody gets a chance to go out there, that was a really cool place to be. Jose Pena, thank you, Theo. Everyone in the GOAT District has been a great help. We appreciate you as well, Jose. There's my man, Cody Carpentier. If you didn't listen last night, Cody came on the GOAT District tailgate, which was awesome. Anytime Cody comes on, he drops some great stuff. And it was also great hanging out with Cody out in Vegas. And we also have the Coven. If you have less than 8 bench spots and no IR help, you got to let them go. Yeah, I think I probably agree with you there, Coven. And shout out to Harry Snowman, first timer here. Good to have you here, Harry Snowman. Hopefully we can be a help to your waivers. So basically, I want to start at the quarterback position. Most leagues I'm in, Jameis Winston is unavailable. He's already rostered, but he would be an intriguing player to add. He's available in 54% of Yahoo leagues. It looks like he's got some very viable weapons. We didn't see Alvin Kamara do much, but we did see some great things from Michael Thomas, some great stuff from Jarvis Landry. Chris Olave was a little quiet, but we know he's got a lot of talent. So that was great to see. Justin Fields, again, a guy who might not be available to you in, if you play 20-man leagues like FFWC, FFPC, NFFC, but he is available to you looks like he's only rostered in 39% of Yahoo leagues. I'm intrigued by Fields. They had kind of a mosh pit type game. It was muddy. It was not a great for fantasy to have, Chicago and San Francisco playing in that conditions, but he did see 11 rushing attempts, which is very promising. So those two guys are intriguing. But the two players I wanted to talk about, maybe you lost to Dak Prescott. I have 2 Dak Prescott teams. One actually won the week and put up a big score line. The guys around him were very good. I had another Dak Prescott team which did very, very poorly. I needed the points on Sunday night, and that one did not go well. But I think you can kind of look at it with a glass half full. Is sometimes in fantasies you have a sunken cost where you draft a guy with expectations and then you kind of put up with it for a few weeks. I think it could have been the case in Dallas. Tampa really shut that offense down even before Dak got hurt. I think that they don't have a whole lot of weapons in Dallas, and I think that could be a situation where they are, going to struggle. So you're maybe better off streaming, and guess what? You're here. So the first guy I'm going to talk about, and this is if anybody enjoys this podcast, I encourage you to go read my article at Player Profiler. I drop a written article. It comes out every Tuesday. We're going to try to drop it a little earlier next week. I think we're going to try to drop it on Monday evening, where I basically do the same thing I'm doing here, and I drop a number of guys that I think you can get in your leagues. We have the 25% Yahoo cutoff. But the quarterbacks that I'm looking at this week in my deeper leagues are Carson Wentz and Marcus Mariota. It's kind of funny to be talking about these guys this early in the season, and we certainly at times have, poked fun at Carson Wentz, but he's in a fantastic situation. He's got a healthy Curtis Samuel to go along with Terry McLaurin and the rookie Jahan Dotson. He's got Logan Thomas at tight end, Antonio Gibson and J.D. McKissick are both very, very capable pass catchers at running back. And this past weekend, Carson Wentz passed for 4 touchdowns and over 300 yards, and it was eye-opening. I got a chance to watch the replay of the game on NFL Plus, and Wentz looks locked in, and he has, very good talent around him. And they also have a really nice matchup against Detroit this week. So I think that if you need a streaming quarterback, Wentz might be the one that I would look to. As crazy as that is, this receiving core is going to elevate him this year. All he's got to do is find the open man. And I think that one of the most intriguing things about Wentz this past weekend was we didn't see McLaurin targeted. He was still able to put up these stats without a big Terry McLaurin game. I believe McLaurin only had 4 targets, which is very low for him. So he's spreading it around. Dotson made just an eye-opening touchdown catch. He's very, very good. I think he's going to beat expectations in Dynasty. Samuel, we're going to talk about in a little bit. So Wentz would be my number one recommendation at the quarterback position. My other streaming quarterback option is actually available in 91% of Yahoo leagues, and he's available in pretty much all of my high-stakes leagues right now, is Marcus Mariota, which seems a little crazy to say, but I think the Atlanta Falcons offense is functional. They did not allow a sack against that New Orleans defensive front. That's a very strong defensive front. They held them without a sack. Mariota will do sloppy things at times. Again, we're not playing regular football out here. We're playing fantasy football, and he's got a rushing floor that few quarterbacks have right now. He ran for 72 yards and a touchdown, and he had 12 carries, which is very impressive. Kyle Pitts did nothing. We know the kind of talent he has. He did pretty much nothing against New Orleans, but Drake London really flashed. He had 5 catches, and Cordero Patterson is an absolute weapon out of that backfield for Mariota. So he's got some talented weapons around him. He's got the rushing upside. I think if you're in a pinch, maybe Wentz might not be available, or you're just feeling loose. Mariota is one guy I would look at. I think that he's got a difficult matchup against the Rams this week, but I think with his rushing floor, he's usable. And the one thing we want to remember is that Arthur Smith, the head coach in Atlanta, had a great deal of success with Ryan Tannehill. He had a top 6 quarterback finish under Smith in Tennessee, and it was largely based on his ability as a rusher. So if you're going to see that sort of rushing floor out of Mariota, then I think he could be a top 15 quarterback this year. And the good thing about him is he's going to be cheap for you. Moving on to the running back position, Isaiah Pacheco, Khalil Herbert, Jamal Williams, Kenny Gainwell, those guys should all be rostered. Those guys are not available to me in pretty much any of my 20-man formats, and I'd imagine most of them are rostered in your leagues as well. If any of them are available, go out and pick them up. Pacheco did most of his work in the fourth quarter, but he scored a touchdown and he looked good. So you can say it was in garbage time, but at the end of the day, rookie running backs' roles increase. So I think Pacheco's one, obviously should be rostered. With all due respect to CEH, who knows where this goes, although CEH looked very good this past week. Khalil Herbert, we have a lot of Khalil Herbert on the GOAT District. He's a favorite of JD's. And he looked good. He had a touchdown. He's like a handcuff plus. Jamal Williams had 2 touchdowns. The way that Detroit offense is looking, he should obviously be rostered. And then Kenny Gainwell had 4 targets. He was the most targeted Eagles running back. And he also had 5 carries and a touchdown. They've got a really interesting Monday night matchup against Minnesota. That game, Minnesota defense brought it against Green Bay, but in Philly, that game kind of feels like it could be a shootout. So Gainwell's one, if you're in a pinch, I think you can use. But the running backs we need to talk about is, the first and foremost is Jeff Wilson. I think Jeff Wilson is if you need a running back, this is a guy you spend some fab on this week. You always have to worry about Kyle Shanahan offenses and, his willingness to move on to the next man at running back. But Wilson has a familiarity with the system. Shanahan seems to like him. I think that, he should be the man in San Francisco. Trey Lance is going to get a lot of rushing attempts. Whether or not that elevates Wilson or hurts him, it remains to be seen. Usually a rushing quarterback can help the running back. But I think Wilson's in a good spot. He should see a handful of targets, but mostly he's going to rely on his legs. San Francisco has a kind of a must-win game against Seattle this weekend after the loss in Chicago. So Wilson would be the guy that I would look to add. I wouldn't go nuts. I don't think this is an Elijah Mitchell situation like last year where, people should go out and spend a massive amount of fab. But if he's available in your league, I would absolutely make a healthy waiver wire ad, a bid on him and kind of see where it goes. The next two running backs that I would want to add are Jalen Warren. Right now, it looks like Najee Harris, at least according to him, is going to try to play. He exited the game with a re-aggravation of his Lisfranc in his foot. So, I don't know. If I had to bet on it, he doesn't play. But he came out and said, I'm going to play. The Steelers are kind of downplaying this whole thing. It seems kind of foolish to kind of rush him back out there, especially after the win against the Bengals. So, I don't know. I would not rush Najee out there. But I think basically my takeaway is Jalen Warren is the handcuff in Pittsburgh. I think it's not even close. He was kind of the talk of the preseason, did a great job in minicamp, did a great job in training camp. They moved on from guys like Benny Snell and Anthony McFarland. So they have some confidence in the rookie, and I think we should for our benches as well. So I would go out and get Warren. And I think that even if Najee plays this week, I think that you could be looking at multiple starts from Warren this year. The Steelers' offense is not great by any means, but we've seen Mike Tomlin running backs put up fantasy points every single season. We've seen it when it's the next man in. They've been able to do their thing. Think back to when James Conner stepped in during the Le'Veon Bell situation. I mean, we've seen it time and time again where a young guy gets an opportunity under Tomlin and exceeds. The next guy we're going to talk about is not young. He's Rex Burkhead. He's 32 years old, and was not a pleasant game to watch for Dameon Pierce drafters this past week because Burkhead was really the guy there. He out-carried Pierce 14-11, and he was also second on the Texans in targets with 8. I think Burkhead's really been on kind of a run on the low. He's been on a run in Houston. He's now seen double-digit carries in 8 of his last 9 games as a Texan, and he's seen 4 or more targets in 4 of his previous 6 games. So he's got a role there. Basically, even if Pierce can flip it and it's like 14-11 Pierce, Burkhead's getting all the high-quality touches, and he's getting the targets. He's a very interesting play. I don't think it's Cordero Patterson from last year, but I think it could be. Burkhead's a guy that nobody in your league is going to really bid for, especially if Wilson and Warren are available. I'd imagine Burkhead would be the number 3 guy, so you might be able to win him with a medium type bid, just depending on your league. I just think he's kind of a boring name, but he's got a clear role there. Brandon Cooks is the man. But after that, it's like a lot of guys receiving a handful of targets here and there, and then Burkhead. So I think Burkhead's kind of a thing right now. Dameon Pierce managers should not panic. Again, Burkhead is 32. It's going to be hard for him to keep this up for the entire season. But if you need a short-term fill-in, I think Burkhead could absolutely be it. I think he's flexible this weekend. Dontrell Hilliard, he should be rostered. I think that he's a guy that will be available in your leagues. He caught 2 touchdown passes this past weekend. He had 61 yards receiving. He's interesting because he's a handcuff, but he's also has a weekly floor potentially with his receiving ability. Derrick Henry had pretty ordinary stat line game for him this week. He actually had to get looked at on the sideline after a big hit. And we know he missed a lot of last season. He only played 8 games. So I think it would be kind of a committee if Henry were to miss time, where Hassan Haskins would get mixed in, but Dontrell Hilliard would get the high-quality touches. He would get a few more targets a game. And I think that he could be a very usable player if Henry were to miss time. And again, he's available. So might want to go out and get him. Be careful about overbidding. Some people go touchdown crazy in these leagues. Kenyon Drake would be another one to consider. This past week, he had 11 carries to Mike Davis's 2. He didn't do anything with them. But I think if you're really in a bind this week, I doubt J.K. Dobbins is back for this game. Drake has only been there like 12 days. So I imagine he's still getting acclimated with playing next to Lamar. But we saw how successful Devonta Freeman was last season, and I think Drake could be that kind of a player. Question in the chat, Famous J, Burkhead or Hilliard? Absolutely Burkhead if I had that. Another question from 1912 Fantasy. Sitting on Herbert and Gainwell, would you drop either for Warren? That's an interesting question. I probably wouldn't. Because I would just, pocket the fab money, and I think it might be kind of a neutral move. I don't know if that necessarily makes you better. I'm a big fan of both those guys, Herbert and Gainwell, but that could come down to personal preference. I probably would just stay put with that one. Shout out to the Harry Snowman. Patterson is also 32. Yes, he is 32. Patterson is just a different kind of athlete, though, and he had all those years where he was not taking hits, so that kind of helped him as well. Moving on to the tight end position, just talking about a couple guys that if they're available in your league, they should be considered. Tyler Higbee had a pretty big role in the loss to Buffalo. He's somewhat of a purgatory player. I don't think he really elevates your team, but he is a big part of the Rams offense. He's available in about 50% of Yahoo leagues. Gerald Everett is available in 72% of Yahoo leagues. In our article on Player Profiler, I mentioned that I would have him ahead of any of the tight ends that I wrote about, and certainly I'd have him ahead of the tight ends that I'm talking about. It looks like Keenan Allen's going to miss this week, Thursday night game, so Everett should see a nice opportunity there. He scored a touchdown this past week. I wouldn't be shocked if he does it again against the Chiefs in what should be a high-scoring game. And then the third guy who's not available in most of my leagues is Robert Tunyan. He had 5 targets last week. Green Bay's kind of a mess in terms of trying to identify a guy who's going to receive a lot of targets, but Tunyan looks like he's got a every week role. He's had success with Aaron Rodgers in the past, so he's a guy to consider. But a few tight ends I wanted to touch on. Taysom Hill, I can't really recommend you spend a lot of fab. I get it. If we think that this Wildcat and using him at quarterback is going to be a thing, then and you think you can get him for cheap and see where this thing goes, then go get him. I just think that people are going to pay up for it, and that's not something I can advocate. But I think what Taysom Hill did this and snap wise, only 16 snaps. But one guy who was pretty much an every down player was Juwan Johnson. Johnson's super interesting to me. He basically ran as many routes as Jarvis Landry, Chris Olave, and Michael Thomas. He was on the field a lot. He flashed last year to start the season as well. He had 2 touchdown catches in the Saints opening win against the Packers last year. So I wrote about him last year, but he didn't play any snaps last year. It was just sort of like a specialist type player that had a lucky game somewhat. This looks like a thing where New Orleans is looking at him as their tight end. He's a very interesting guy. Every year we see tight ends break out that started on the waiver wire, and I think Johnson could be that. He's a former wide receiver. He's just very intriguing to me. If he's going to get this sort of routes run every game, he's going to be viable. So he's a guy I want to get ahead of my league mates on. Hayden Hurst, he had 8 targets. He caught 5 passes. Whether that was because T. Higgins left the game remains to be seen. But he's another guy where people might overlook him because he's sort of a boring name. But he almost scored a touchdown pass. It was like a shovel pass around the goal line, towards the end of the game where Cincinnati just couldn't get in the end zone. He was tackled at the goal line. So I think if he would have scored that touchdown, people would have been a little bit more on Hayden Hurst. He's a guy I'd want to grab for cheap to see if he becomes a thing. Again, we like that Cincinnati offense, and he's a guy I would look at. And then for deep dynasty managers, Colin Granson seems to be ahead of Mo Alley-Cox right now in terms of usage. He had 6 targets to Mo Alley-Cox's 1. Granson was a guy that we kind of liked on the Go District as a prospect. So if you're in a deep dynasty league, he might be worth a grab. He had a nice career at NC State. We've seen Matt Ryan kind of elevate tight ends, but he seems to be clearly ahead of Mo Alley-Cox and Jelani Woods. So keep an eye on him. Again, it's kind of a rough week for adding a tight end in some of these deeper formats. So don't go too nuts. But Juwan Johnson would be kind of like my gut shot guy. And again, if Higbee, Everett, or Tunyan were available, I would look to them. Wide receiver is fun. Robbie Anderson was drafted in a lot of leagues as like a 20th round type guy. And it looks like he's back. He led the Panthers in targets. Not a good thing to hear if you're a DJ Moore manager, but he led him in targets. He had 8 targets, and he caught 5 passes, including a Robbie Anderson-like 75-yard touchdown. It's always fun to roster Robbie Anderson. He's like a what-the-heck flex type, big boom-bust potential. But it looks like he's back, and he's available in a lot of leagues. He would be a guy that I would prioritize this week and look to add. I think that the fact that Curtis Samuel did what he did might keep Robbie Anderson's cost slightly lower. But Terrace Marshall is dust. Terrace Marshall was inactive. Shee Smith was out there running slot snaps, and I don't think he's the guy that we're going to be talking about adding this year. So Carolina needs weapons besides CMC and DJ Moore. I think Anderson has a real chance to have a season. So it's always, we use the word mercurial when we talk about Robbie Anderson, and he's that. But sometimes in these bye weeks, a guy like him can really help you. So he's a guy that I would want to have on my bench and kind of see where this thing goes. Another interesting player is Donovan Peoples-Jones. He had 11 targets, third-year wide receiver out of Michigan. Amari Cooper only had 6 targets, and Peoples-Jones tied Cooper in the amount of snaps he played. No other wide receiver in Cleveland saw more than 2 targets. So DPJ looks like a locked-in, every-down wide receiver. Obviously, Jacoby Brissett is not going to make anybody too happy. But if he's seeing these sort of targets and target share and downfield looks, Donovan Peoples-Jones should absolutely be rostered. His stat line was nothing crazy, so I think he's a guy that's going to be a little cheaper than a Robbie Anderson or a Curtis Samuel. So if you want to save a little money, DPJ might be your guy this week. Kyle Phillips. Wow, the Kyle Phillips is just balling out there. He had 27% target share. He's playing the slot in Tennessee. It's crazy to me. He outgained my guy Treylon Burks, and I think he's way ahead of him right now in terms of reliability. Burks had a nice start in terms of he had 3 catches. He looked explosive. He had a 20-yard gain on one of them. But Phillips, he led the team in targets. He had 9 targets. He caught 6 balls for 66 yards, and he just gets open. I think that he's good at football. I think he's available in your league, and I think he's going to be a thing. And the nice thing about Kyle Phillips is I think that slot role is his. I think Treylon Burks, as he gets more and more of a role, which I expect him to do, if you're in a small league and Burks is available, by all means, go get Burks. I think Burks is a baller. But I think when Burks takes his next step, I think that's going to hurt Nick Westbrook-Akine and Robert Woods more so than Kyle Phillips. It's kind of a youth movement in Tennessee, and Phillips should not be ignored at this point. He just proved it on the field. Curtis Samuel would probably be my number one target this week. It's awesome seeing Curtis Samuel back out there. He had a massive game usage-wise. He had 11 targets. He had 4 rushing attempts. He ended up with 8 catches and a touchdown. And the 4 rushing attempts is just awesome to see. Ron Rivera went out and pointed out that Samuel was a big part of their game plan. They wanted to establish Samuel early on to set the tone against Jacksonville, which was just awesome to see. And Samuel not only had these stats, but if you get a chance to go back and watch the game, Samuel was making Jacksonville defenders miss in the open field. I mean, he looked great. He said, "I'm back," after he scored a touchdown. You're talking about a guy who averaged 11 points per game in 2019, and he averaged 13.8 points a game in 2020. So he's had fantasy success. He's had fantasy success under Ron Rivera, and he's also a former running back at Ohio State. So he's got rushing ability as well. I think Curtis Samuel should be a flex for you this week. If you can get him on the waiver wire, I think you can throw him right in your lineup because we've seen him have previous success. He was a big free agent signing when Rivera got to Washington. And he's struggled to stay healthy. But now that he's out there, the way they're using him, he's elevating that entire offense. A couple of wide receivers one more wide receiver to mention, Zay Jones, who was also a big free agent signing for Jacksonville this past offseason. He had 9 targets and 6 catches for 65 yards. He was also targeted in the end zone, didn't catch it, but Trevor Lawrence is looking his way. He had a 3-year, $24 million contract thrown his way. Looks like he's running ahead of Marvin Jones. And then a few guys that I don't expect will be available in your league, but if they are, Jarvis Landry, DJ Shark, and Jacoby Myers, they all should be rostered everywhere. So if you're in a shallower league and you can get one of those guys, go get them. The last name was Devin Duvernay. Duvernay only ran 18 routes, but he had 2 touchdown catches. So I wouldn't go overspending for him, but he's worth, $1 or $2 bid. See if people kind of overlook him in your home league. He is a very explosive player. I don't know if he could be a weekly thing though, but he should be rostered. Harry Snowman asks, what % fab would you throw at Curtis Samuel? I hate giving a number here. I would imagine that he goes for north of 20% in every league, just based on how he started. And I think a lot of people like to spend their money early because then you could have a guy for, double-digit weeks as opposed to saving money like some managers do for the end. So I'm not quite sure what your league is. If you think that your league mates are going to be aggressive, you might want to go, 24%. But again, he's a guy that I would like to come away with. Shout out to Marcus Lynch. Marcus Lynch, it was nice to meet you in Vegas, Theo. It was great meeting you as well, Marcus. Really, really great to get to catch up with some of these people. Listen to the GOAT District. And I'm glad we can be a help to you. Appreciate the shout out for the Waiver Wire show. So that wraps it up. I appreciate the comments in the chat. We're going to be back on Thursday evening. We've got a awesome guest. If anybody's listened to Jax Falcone of the Undroppables, he's been on the GOAT District multiple times. He is one of the sharpest guys around. He's going to be on a tailgate show. We're going to go on about an hour before the Chargers play the Chiefs. I'm excited for that Thursday night game. I'm looking for a big bounce back game from Mike Williams. Looks like Keenan Allen's going to be out. And I'm hoping that we get a high scoring game. So it's going to be awesome, to catch up with Jax Falcone and the rest of the GOAT District crew. I hope you enjoyed this and have a great night, everybody.